17 Again, Retrospective, Part 2. Recap. 17 Again is a fantasy comedy film that can be classified as a hybrid genre. It contains elements of drama, romance, and action. The film's narrative focuses on Sydney Donovan's life. Sid is a 17-year-old high school junior who has to face life in a new town. She has to learn to adjust to her mother's death, her father, Barry, remarrying her new stepmother, Monique, and bullying at school from Ashley. Ashley is the most popular girl at school and happens to be the older sister of her crush, Todd. Her younger brother, Willie, is an aspiring lab scientist who conducts experiments in his parents' garage. After a lab experiment goes wrong, he nearly burns the house down and alerts 911. Thereafter, Willie gets grounded from using any of his lab equipment. Unknowingly, the chemicals spill onto the soap, causing a strange reaction. Before dinner, Willie sets the soap up in his grandparents' bathroom to use. Their divorced grandparents fly into town and by happenstance schedule their trips at the same time. From the moment they arrive, they begin to bicker and their dysfunction is on full display. When Monique receives a phone call that her sister is in labor, she and Barry must go out of town to be by her side. The grandparents have to look after Sid and Willie for 10 days. The grandparents use the contaminated soap in the shower and they wake up 17 years old again. While they enjoy reliving their youth briefly, they discover that the chemicals from the soap have harmful effects that can be deadly. Willie uses his dog Gypsy as a test subject to try to reverse the side effects. The film's opening sequence reveals most of what we need to know about the personality traits of the characters. Each small action foreshadows what will be revealed in the movie. Character analysis. Sydney is upstairs clueless about what her brother is doing in the garage. She's self-consumed. On the surface, Sydney seems like a bratty teenager with a bad attitude. We learn why she complains a lot and becomes self-focused. Her mother's dying when she was young, lack of attention from her father, and moving from LA to Connecticut all contribute to her attitude. Sydney would be an example of a round character. By the end of the film, her attitude does a complete 180. She learns to get along with her brother, she overcomes her insecurities about thinking Todd doesn't like her, and she extends an olive branch to her stepmother. Willie has aspirations of becoming a scientist, but he's angry that his family doesn't take him seriously. He's tempted to give up on himself, but proves himself as a good scientist when he reverses the aging effects. Willie is a round character because his attitude towards himself and his science work shifts by the end of the film. However, he is less complex of a character than the other main characters. We know that the grandparents are bitter because they're already gossiping about each other before even arriving to the house. We know they're both selfish because they only complain about what bothers them. It is revealed later that Grandpa Gene was selfish in his marriage and decided to take a job in Australia despite having a family. Ultimately, it broke up his marriage. When he's turned back into a teenager, he stays out enjoying teenage life and doesn't bother to call home. The grandparents are essentially the same person. They're both examples of rounded characters because by the end of the film they fall back in love and stop being hard-hearted. Monique has a type A personality. She wants to be accepted by her stepchildren and doesn't feel that she fits in with her in-laws yet. She initially doesn't feel comfortable calling her mother-in-law Mom and refers to her by her surname. It's implied that she's tired of trying to please her stepdaughter when Sydney asks for a specific vegan request for dinner. Monique seems worn out by her efforts. Monique would be an example of a flat character. She doesn't really change throughout the film because she's more of a secondary or supporting character. However, she does get the acceptance that she's been looking for from her family by the end of the film. I wish we could have seen more of the parents in the film. It would have been a good idea if they called home multiple times to check on how the grandparents and kids are doing, and everyone would have had to make excuses. Barry is also a flat character. He comes off level-headed, reasonable, and slightly strict. He's trying to be a good dad and a new husband. Sydney works at a local convenience store. This is where we're introduced to her friend and co-worker Julie. Julie is quirky and believes in New Age witchcraft. Julie is a flat character, but her consistency throughout the film helps Sydney adapt to her new life in Connecticut. She's someone who Sydney can lean on and take advice from. During the same scene, we're introduced to Todd, who is also a flat character, and Sydney's crush. Ashley is a bully and superficial, and she's a flat character, but she's far from boring. She's the main antagonist in the film. She tries to stop everything from going right in Sydney's life. Leo and Terrence are also examples of flat characters that provide comedic moments throughout the film. They take Grandpa under their wing when he's 17 again, and they try to use his looks to attract girls. Highlights and best scenes. There are several scenes that stuck out to me in this movie that were crucial to the film's narrative. Sydney's job. The scene where Sydney is at work and the audience is introduced to Julie. Terrence catcalls Sid and Julie marks Terrence several times with the Telzon gun. She imitates him and sarcastically asks, "Can I get a price check, please?" This is one of the funniest pieces of dialogue in the film. The family dinner. During the family dinner, the grandparents interrupt the meal by getting into a petty argument. Grandma Cat gives Sydney some uplifting advice about her relocation to a new city. She tells her just to give it time and she might start to like it. Grandpa starts the argument by saying, "Your grandmother is right for a change." He ends the argument by telling Grandma Cat, "Talk to the hand." This was a popular phrase used by kids at the time. During the argument, Grandma Cat calls him Mr. Think He's So Hip. This would explain his actions later in the film. When they become 17 years old again, he's excited about being youthful without thinking rationally. He didn't consider the side effects, which shows he's impulsive, immature, and only thinking about the moment. Grandma Cat discovers she's 17 again. Grandma Cat wakes up and she walks past the mirror. She screams when she sees herself in a younger body. The reaction was so comical because it was realistic. Tahj Mowry nails the role as an elderly woman stuck in a teenage body. She mastered the mannerisms, diction, and voice inflections. Tamera switches her voice later in the film when Grandma Cat has to pretend to be Sydney. Todd accidentally asks Grandma Cat out on a date thinking she's Sid. Grandma accepts to make Grandpa Gene jealous. The minute she steps out the door, she changes her accent and pitch to appear youthful. Grandma Cat goes to high school. When Grandma Cat goes to Sydney's high school to find out how she's 17 again, she has several run-ins with the new generation of teenagers. She learns that school in the new millennium is different than it was in the 40s and 50s. She encounters bullies, hoodlums, and devil worshippers. The film was hilarious because Tamera was so young but sounded so old. Grandma Cat and Sydney accidentally run into each other in the bathroom and discover that she looks just like Sid. This scene is reminiscent of the first episode of Tia and Tamera's sitcom, Sister Sister. Earlier in the film, Grandpa Gene tells Sid, "You look like a spitting image of your Grandma Cat when she was your age." We now understand why this line was imperative to the film. Thereafter, Sydney and Grandma pick Willie up from school. Willie asks Sydney, "Who's the freak in the front seat?" Grandma replies, "Don't you call me a freak because something strange happened to me. I'm your grandmother, boy." This scene always got a laugh from me and my family as a kid. Instant teenage grandparents. One scene that always creeped me out a little bit was when Willie discovered why his grandparents are 17 again. He realizes the soap became contaminated and got in their bloodstream. Sid and Willie look at each other and say, "Instant teenage grandparents." This was a common cheesy trope used in movies in the 90s and early 2000s, but at the time it scared me as a kid. The mysterious, dramatic background music always freaked me out. The swing dance scene. When Todd and Grandma Cat go out on a date, she and Sydney come up with a plan to switch places during the middle of the night. Grandma tells her to wear a similar black dress so that it will go unnoticed. Sydney walks into the Orange Room Teen Club and sees Todd and her grandmother dancing together. Her feelings are hurt and she runs out of the Orange Room. Grandpa Gene and Grandma Cat go looking for Sydney and stop at a swing music event. The swing music takes them back to their days of when they first started dating. They showcase some amazing dance skills in this scene. Sydney tells Julie about the grandparents being 17 again. This scene is used for the trailer and commercials sometimes because it sums up the movie in under 30 seconds. Sydney quickly rattles off to Julie what happened to her grandparents. It takes tremendous acting skills from Tia to be able to talk that fast. Grandma apologizes to Sydney. When Grandma Cat finally comes home, Sydney is furious. Todd called the house looking for Sydney, who he thinks left the Orange Room with Gene. Todd now thinks she's disinterested. Sydney tells Grandma that she ruined the small chance she had of dating Todd. This shows she's blinded by her insecurities. Additionally, Sydney tells Grandma Cat that she ruined her marriage with Grandpa Gene, and now she's ruining her love life. Later, Grandma Cat comes to Sydney's job to apologize. She admits she was right about the marriage falling apart. This shows a tremendous turnaround in her attitude and is a major turning point in the film. She convinces Sydney to go to the school dance with her and closes the scene by saying, "Let's go get our men." The school dance. When Sydney and Grandma Cat walk into the school dance, the other characters realize Sydney and Grandma are two different people. Throughout the film, everyone within the world of the story believes that Sydney and Cat are the same person. Even Grandpa Gene and Julie couldn't tell them apart. The line where Ashley says, "Oh my God, there's two of them," was always amusing because of her genuine disgust for Sydney. Sydney punches out Ashley. One of the final scenes in the movie, Sydney finally starts to stand up for herself. Willie races to the school with a cure for the grandparents, but the antidote only works in water. On their way to the pool, Ashley tries to stop them. Sydney punches Ashley and knocks her out. I'm not an advocate of violence, but this scene was always satisfying as a viewer to watch her finally be humbled. The film closes by Willie turning the grandparents back to 67-year-olds before Monique and Dad get home. Sydney and Todd end up together and the grandparents plan to remarry. Overview. The theme. The central theme of the film is love is a choice. Healthy love and relationships have to be fought for. Although we are dropped into the life of Sydney Donovan and she's our main protagonist, she also serves as a vehicle for a love story. Furthermore, the grandparents were separated for 2 decades, but found themselves back together after letting go of each other. They would have stayed together had they communicated better and refused their egos. The second theme would be perseverance, man versus self. Sydney and Willie must overcome their own battles. Willie had to fail several times before proving himself as a reliable scientist. Sydney had to face life in a new town and overcome insecurities and obstacles. By the end of the film, she ends up getting what she wants. Goal. A goal is a narratively significant object pursued by the protagonist. Sydney's goal in the film is to make her new life in the suburbs like her life in Los Angeles. After overcoming obstacles and learning from her grandparents, she finds her new life is better. She found her own love in Todd and she found a best friend in Julie. She understands her grandmother on a deeper level, becomes closer to her brother, and is open to having a relationship with her stepmother. Character archetypes. Films in the late 90s and early 2000s had many of the same character archetypes. Sydney is a bratty teenager with a bad attitude and a stereotypical teen girl born after the 1980s. Ashley is a typical cliquish mean girl. She's popular, has followers, she's pretty, a cheerleader, and picks on the protagonist. It seemed like in the 90s and early 2000s films, the school bullies were always bigger, wore jean jackets, and the girls wore their hair in twists or bandanas. The contaminated bars of soap served as the film's motif. A motif is a recurring visual sound or narrative that imparts meaning or significance. Throughout the film, the director uses numerous close-up shots of the soap to show its importance to the storyline. I'm Anthony Morton. I want to thank you for watching part 2 of the 17 Again retrospective. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe.